You okay? Geshe said mental prostrations today. Mental prostrations today. I really had to convince him not to do them. He was got to be careful that first day of healing. So Geshe was saying that when one is so in the duschene So he was saying that in the monastery, when one goes into the dukang, into the assembly hall, and one is not able to make prostrations, he was kind of motioning that you go like this as kind of a substitute for the prostration that you're not able to make. And so Geshe said that he's not sure kind of how, I guess I could say, kosher that is. So he just offered, with Anjali, some mental prostrations today. Gemba dang gemba. Yeah. Loso. Gemba dang gemba la padroya. Yeah. So Geshe was sharing something else interesting about the monastery, which is when you have a senior Sangha member and a junior Sangha member, and it doesn't happen often, but there can be points in various rituals where I guess the monks prostrate to each other. So a senior member normally would not prostrate to a junior Sangha member. That would be incongruous. And so at that time also there's kind of a substitute motion that you can do with the arm covered, as Geshe was showing. Yeah. So Geshe was saying one example. So what's an example of where a senior monk might have to prostrate to the junior monk? If the junior monk is in charge of discipline and the senior monk needs to take leave from the monastery for a few days, the senior monk would normally have to prostrate when you request that. But of course, here they would do the substitute. So just a little bit of monastic sociology today to start it off. So can everyone hear Geshe okay? So tashi deli to everybody. So of course our gathering together today, in terms of the purpose of this, it is to activate the potential of our mind. It is also to open up and make the mind vaster. So of course we are within cyclic existence, we are within samsara, and in all the realms within that, right, there are continuous problems that are happening. But if as much as possible we focus on this task of activating the potential of the mind, of creating a mind that is spacious and vast, we can come to a point where those problems are far less disturbing. So, of course, a lot of our discussion relates to some of the temporary problems that we encounter, right? And how to diminish and get rid of those. So, for example, when we meet with a problem, how do we examine our reaction to it? How do we transform our mind's way of thinking about or apprehending it?
다 수지도 현재 선바소 다 지바지조로 왔어. 도망가서도 지바래. 대신 니네 지부게 땜보진 대화 요원이라.
So the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, those Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are those holy beings now, they started out the same as us. They wished for the same stable happiness that we wish for, and then they thought, what are the things that we need to do to transform in order to be able to reach that?
And
the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, they looked at the nature of samsara, of cyclic existence, and saw that, continuing to cycle through this would not bring that satisfaction. So it was not okay to continue cycling.
So
not saying that samsaric happiness is not something that you need, right? Not saying that. It is a matter of emphasis, knowing that if we only aim at samsaric happiness, this will not provide something satisfying. So don't remain sort of intoxicated by samsaric happiness. So we know that even if we are very successful, right, within samsara, if we become the equivalent of a king or the equivalent of a queen, we know that based on how samsara is in flux, a small change could happen that would completely upend our position. So there is no lasting happiness to be found within that. Yeah. And so we also know that perhaps that wouldn't be such a big problem if that we call the self and that we call my mind sort of just ended at the end of this life, like a tree that has dried out or a flower that has wilted away. But we know that this is not the case, that the self and that we call the I continue on. So their basis or their sort of abode may change, right, this body and so forth, but that we call the I and that we call my mind, which are inseparable, they will continue traveling from basis to basis together. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So one argument that is made for this is that we understand that that we call the self and my mind, right? That before we are born, we occupy our mother's womb, right? And so there is how do you call it that? The zygote or something? There is the zygote that is there, right? And then but that is a result. So there has to be a result that is similar to a cause. So there has to be a self and my mind, an increment of that precedes the one that is abiding within the womb. Yeah. And we also understand that it can't just simply be one cause. There has to be a substantial cause as well as a concordant cause, right? It's several causes that come together. So in a lot of explanations, what it says is that if we look at the substantial cause of the self or the I, it is the previous moment of that I, right? Which is going from moment to moment. Similar with that we call my mind, right? The substantial cause of mind or consciousness is that previous instance, that previous moment of mind or consciousness.
어다 세리 발라 대따던 로토마 이사탄 요다 코르마탄디야 마스 오차야시라요 말이스.
So, scientists can't sort of look beyond the physical, right? So they can't think of these lines of reasoning. So therefore, there are limits to the explanations they can offer.
어다 코로솔라 시 첨보니 테카디나 강에테그레세 요아레스 요나 지치 코나라 되는 지고유야.
Yeah.
요나
Konasana tunpa.
지치 지볼라 되네.
Oh, right.
지고유야.
Oh, right. Right.
요나 마튼 비절라 되는 지고.
Yeah.
탐바유야지요.
So scientists face this difficulty when they try to present the conception of consciousness, right? Because there's a limitation that either they can only sort of propose one cause of it, or that the cause that they propose is not a complete match, is not congruent with the result.
어다테 코로스 다 코로스 놀러를 저와 깔레 카쇼 되니테레스 가디라세 요아레스.
Kare kasha. Sem kare la tene chungires.
Mar.
Dansar kare.
지치 코나라 되는 지고유야.
Yeah.
좀 마튼 발라 되는 지고유야데.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that sort of troubles a lot of the scientific explanations. Like, how can a complex result come from just one cause? And how can a result come from an incongruent cause? Nipadi cheshi jasho nganso semdang dag seria de kandes la kure. Supla tene Ale, loso. I'll save my question for later.
어다 나로서 인지 민지 지치 지볼라 되는 지고유야 문두. 마튼 비절라 되네. 지고유야 문두. 어다테 할래야지요.
So in the Buddhist explanation, we understand that a complex result cannot arise from a single cause. And also logically, we understand that the result must be similar to the cause. It cannot arise from an incongruent cause.
어다스 손지가 저이 개자 말다서 어서서 손지가 저 개자 마시야.
Ale, loso.
고롱예 네스티 손지가 망안줄을 내셔자요.
So to be clear also, this is not something that the Buddha invented, right? This Buddha is simply one realized being who explained the nature of how things are, how these things actually work.
렌데세나레 샤왕아시세나레 똥바니에세나 손지가 저이 개자 말했어. 예 네츠를 던지지야. 이제 대 손지가 나로서마 찌대요.
So past and future lifetimes, karma or cause and effect, profound emptiness, these are not things that Lord Buddha invented. They are simply the way that things are, and the Buddha offered an explanation of them.
거로가 딱 미야 샤와 뭐 까와 뭐를 깔래자네 세요 아쇼 타가 논내라 쇼바도 니지도 쇼는 대지 논내라 쇼바 첨보 니지 첨보 쇼지 세세하데 매나 마루스 타막 이네 된지고 타도데 토야매 바로.
Similarly, he explained based upon his own experience how the method teachings of love and compassion, how great love, great compassion, and subsequently bodhicitta are so necessary to arise as the congruent causes of final enlightenment, and that in the absence of those, final enlightenment is not possible.
든지지레 다 대무 대연다스 깨제신에 든지레세 아마 뭐 순지 코로 뇨뇨라 든지쇼 이자스고 어다 땡아로서 막 찌제바르마 순지가 저이 깨자 말해.
So the Buddha did not create these teachings, right? And he also did not adhere to them out of dogma, but it was the way that he understood things really are according to his own experience. This is very important.
어단에서 든지징에네서요. 이자 다 레바 자침보 세리바이나 순지가 치도 실루레면 됐어. 세 세리레 두에서 아지세 데려와.
So this is why many scientists say that, a lot of the Buddhist teachings are just simply describing the way things are or what is. Now, for that reason, they say that Buddhism is not really a religion in the dogmatic sense, that one could consider it to be a science of the mind.
어다 모드스 때네 당아로서 샤왕아마도 심마타고 따야긴 대와요나. 든지지네 다 갈레갈레 소노도 그.
So if you want to develop, some conviction or understanding in past lifetimes and future lifetimes, these are a few lines of reasonings that you could that you could think about again and again.
돈보가 좀벌레레리 세데 돈보 가와네 슈드. 타마 세데 코 맨로고도 가와로고도. 어다들이 지네 아마
So we think again and again, and we explore, and then we can come to the hope of understanding. So for example, this mind that is accompanying that tiny being in the womb and that sense of self, where did that come from? And when we reach the end of this lifetime, where do that mind and that self go? So really contemplate and think about this, and then we have hope of developing real understanding. Yeah. So, one of the ways we can develop conviction about this is to read all of the materials about people who recollect their previous lives. So that's one thing to do. Another thing to do is to use our own logic, right, to cultivate an internal, an internal dialogue of experience. That can also be really helpful. Oh, yeah. So the glorious Dharma Kirti in the Tsemanamje Liunipa, in the second chapter of the Pramanavartika, also makes some very convincing arguments for past and future lifetimes. I'm not sure if that full text is available in English, but maybe someone knows. And this text was one that really moved Lama Tsongkhapa, for example. It was said that when Lama Tsongkhapa was studying or teaching his text, that he had an expression that was more joyous than usual. So, yeah. So the Pramanavartika is not the Pramanavartika in English, we often say the treatise on valid cognition, I think. So this text does not make its arguments primarily using scriptural citations. It primarily makes its arguments only through reasoning itself. Why is liberation possible? Presents the logic behind that, the logic behind Buddhahood, the logic behind past and future lifetimes, and for this reason, right, it is very helpful. So, because this is, such a kind act to compose this text, and because this text is so sort of seminal in terms of one's understanding, it is studied widely at the three seats, Sera, Ganden, Drepung, but Geshe also saying that it is studied in many of the scholastic monasteries of the other traditions as well. So it's a very important text. So, because we can't really see kind of directly through our own experience how liberation is possible and what that liberation would be like, or what the incomprehensible happiness or bliss of Buddhahood would be like, because we can't really conceptualize them, then it can be hard to motivate ourselves to work towards them, right? So that's where this text is so important. As you said, it's a lot easier to win, like, here we say soccer. Over in Europe, you guys would say football. It's a lot easier to win a soccer or football match, right? Because sorry, not just soccer. Any game that they play at the Olympics, because there's like a result right in front of your face that you are working towards, right? But in the spiritual realm, it is not like that. So the bliss of liberation, even the bliss of arising bodhicitta, right? These are happinesses that we have not experienced yet. So, the template that we use to kind of motivate ourselves is that they are a bliss or happiness that is beyond the greatest bliss that we can experience within samsara.
어다 나세한테 줘야 문도 세세한테 줘야 되는 문도 조지 되지레스.
Another important point here, the I or the self is endless. The mind is endless. This is very important to understand.
다 이나요 줘야 요바데 가르레스 거의 너한테 거의 등한테 안다 세도년도 땜본다고 요한테 그 줘야 요하레스.
But there is an end to samsara. There is an end to the suffering or the problems of samsara. So the samsara experience that is abiding with our mind and ourself right now, there is an end to that.
언덕에 와서 다 강에 그차 녀모 그차 간디 지나요 그 로워 지레도 마도 어다 세도년도 가디나 대도게 되면
So whether we think about problems generally, whether we think about the afflictions in particular, it's very important to understand that they are not part of the mind, that they are adventitious, right? It's merely at this moment they are covering the mind.
다 대우 내서 한 레비 도종지라 언데 저 조가르 콘로 조가르서는 간조 셀 된데 마대와 요시 바지레 코페 한 레비 때보다고 진도 왔어.
So one thing that may be nice to hear at this point is when we say that there's like an end to attachment, that there's an end to anger, it's like very difficult to kind of relate to that because the attachment and anger in our mind seem so strong, right?
다 이나요 똥바니로 와서는 똥바니 코로파게 쓰고 진 녀선다 버치 버게 세메 도소나 다 대지 강가 내가 용토고 말했더니 강가 랭아바 강가 뭐하러 그랬으나 아주 때데
But if we develop our understanding of emptiness, and if we come to an understanding of what a pramana, or a valid cognition of emptiness, they say tsema in Tibetan, sema, is, if we can somehow think about what that is, then we can see how this will be a direct antidote to the afflictions such as anger and attachment.
건조 강가 대 아고서로 내저 공통 가져 저도 강가
Anger, attachment, jealousy, all of these other minds, we need to understand that they are the servants, the branches of self-grasping ignorance. So, if that ignorance is kind of like the ruler or the root of all of these minds, if we are able to cultivate the antidote that targets that ignorance directly, then as that antidote becomes more powerful, all of the other afflictions will diminish and fall away. So, the purpose of Buddha Dharma, for exactly this reason, the purpose of Buddha Dharma ultimately is to arise wisdom, not just to purify negativities, right? Not just merely that. It's like this darkness of our lack of understanding, which is like a darkened room, even for many kalpas, for many eons, right? When the lamp of the wisdom realizing emptiness is lit, then everything is illuminated, and that darkness is instantaneously cleared away. So this is one of the reasons, right, that we put the effort to come here and that we put the effort into our study. Yeah. So let us just take a moment to relax the mind. So we want to be able to bring the elements into balance. By bringing the elements into balance, the body is at ease and the mind is peaceful. I'm going to relax into the nature of the fundamental mind. By relaxing into this nature, whatever thoughts, feelings, mental projections that are arising, I simply will allow them to float by. I will not pay them attention. Our main mind that we think of as abiding at the heart, the nature of this fundamental mind, when the clouds of discursive thoughts are parted away, the nature of this mind is emptiness. It is clarity. It is knowingness. The mind is clear in knowing. Think about the moment in the morning when the sunrise breaks, and then when the sun starts to rise, all the darkness of the night is dispelled, and the mountains, the trees, the flowers, and so forth, these all become visible. When we think of the mind's quality of pure luminosity, we understand that if we relax into this nature of the mind, if we develop this nature of the mind, the clarity of that luminosity can clear away ignorance, can clear away attachment, can clear away the afflictions. So we understand that in order to activate this luminous potential of our mind, we have to cultivate not the outer causes for that, the inner causes for that. In order to be able to do this, we can request assistance and inspiration. We understand that the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, are able to provide this. So we bring forth faith and confidence in the three jewels to receive their blessings to actualize this. So think of all sentient beings, all those sentient beings in samsara without exception. if I wish to lead them not only to temporary happiness, but also to every ultimate happiness, then the self, the I, must actualize the three jewels within the mind. I will actualize the three jewels myself to be able to benefit all of these beings, bring forth bodhicitta.
세그시도 예때 가리나 요로지 접아 때네 메아이사 다 가소승년이 땐데 저와도 가리나 또 도래 그래서
The faults of the mind and likewise the mind's qualities, none of these are inherently or truly existent. For this reason, through cultivation, change is possible.
단 먹어먹어지 드리마 가진 적이 있어와
Los. Kadin Rebe.
간데 내려더니 가 유코는 적이 있어.
Yeah. So Geshe said that he'd like to get through a good chunk of words of my perfect teacher today. So after the recitation of the prayers, we will hop right to the text. So let us do it. Yeah, he said it was quite kind of a long introduction, so we'll just jump to the text after the prayers. Ba chom den de te shin che ba dra chom ba yang da ba zo be sang ge je ba dang sha su den ba de wa she ba shi den chen ba che bu du we ka lo jur wa la na me ba la da mi nam gi den ba sang ge chom den de pe ja wa sha kya tu ba la cha se lo che de kya su chi ho den ba chom den de shin che ba tra chung ba yang da ba zo be song ge je ba da sha su den ba de wa she ba shi den chen ba che bu de we ka lo jo wa la na me ba la da mi nam gi den ba song ge chung den de pe ja wa sha kya tu ba la cha se lo che de kya su chi ho den ba chung den de shin che ba tra chung ba yang da ba zo be song ge je ba dang sha su den ba de wa she ba shi den chen ba che bu du we ka lo jo wa la na me ba la da mi nam gi den ba song ge chong den de pe ja wa sha kya tu ba la cha se lo che de kya su chi ho sa ji pe gi je je me do cha ji ra lin ji ni di gyam ba di Sangye Shindo Mide Bowagi Joku Nanda Shinla Chepar Sho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryata. Oh, okay, so Geshe said we'll not do the extra prayers. He wants to jump right to the text, so we'll go to refuge and bodhicitta. Chedan sogi chunam la jangchu badu dani kya su chi dagi chunyen gi be sunam gi jola penchir sangye drupa sho Chedan sogi chunam la jangchu badu dani kya su chi dagi chunyen gi be sunam gi jola penchir sangye drupa sho Chedan sogi chenam la jangchu badu dani kya su chi dagi chenyen gibe senam gi jola penjir sangye drupa sho.
Oye ta gnu tangi si ta chawa ras tani ta tani mo ka che ta no ji ke ja mo shi sa yun yun ge go de
Yeah.
아니 저와 또녀던 데는 로도다 노지 뭐 베지 또 여러 왔어.
So then, the motivation was already extensively set, so not much, so no need to go into that again. And then also just briefly in terms of the preliminary meditations, we often do the 9-point breathing meditation and so forth together. We often mention how this is done for bringing forth a state of equanimity, right? A neutral state of mind.
tene ru jin zi do dan rewa yi na yo mo ta page da gewa to chimbo ji don tene mo nyo le che ji ya was
rang chin jen chin
ru jin zi
ale
ru jin zi yo ba yi na yo
ale loso
mo ta so so don tene la ro
okay.
page gewa to chimbo la ba ji ya les
So there's also a way to do a meditation with the breath when even when it is kind of related to a self-cherishing mind, through doing it correctly, it can still become an accumulation of virtue.
les wa da ya shu de to chen shu de wo yun jin ge don tene la da ye jin zi don tene la da page ya nyo le to le yi na yo ko ran ji mo bo ya les.
However, the very best, of course, is that when we combine meditation on the breath with a mind that cherishes others, and we speak about this practice of tonglen, or, it is sending and receiving, but it's commonly said taking and giving, so I'll say that. So taking and giving. And there are also different ways to practice taking and giving, sort of lesser powerful, middling powerful, and most powerful.
어다 나로서 이나요 단단히 자리에서는 로로 소소가 다 보게 사바 이나요 어다 돈레 녀레 대지 다 자리다다 저 거마도 거와는 당가서 내선다 뭐라 용거서 왔어
Ale, loso.
야 그거 천천로 가게 배도 몇발 돈레 그 돈이 보게 배도 요야던데 내서 뭐 용거야
So, tonglen, this practice is something that, especially if we're relatively new, we want to make sure that we kind of set the pieces of it in place correctly. Gonda tonglen di nganzo dak sogare karinsena di apoko.
자리다다 저 거래 소소 녀레 셔도
Yeah.
다네
로서.
거와는 오 내선다 뭐라 용거야 이자 천천로 다 메도 던지 공용 마페 봐
Yeah,
돈레라 때는 배도 요야던데 내서 뭐 용거야
because if we understand how to apply the practice of tonglen correctly, then when we encounter all of these various inevitable problems of samsara, we can use tonglen as an antidote. And there are many stories of people using tonglen, and achieving great transformation. Yeah.
아까서 왔어 어다 듣지래 그냥 근데 그 깔라 첨보지라 아까서 근데 그 깔라 첨보지를 레와 가디나 유아산에 주주자 그래
Yes, yeah.
다디티 가디나 유산에 자지 시가
So His Holiness the Dalai Lama always has he repeats this sort of piece of advice often, which is set your hopes to the highest possible hope, but prepare according to the most difficult circumstance. So, in other words, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Yeah.
하고서 어다 때 자가지리 옛날에 너무 지리 옛날에 소설이 옛날에 다티깔라데 할야지 야고서는 또나.
And whether we think about that particular piece of advice on the level of like relationships between countries, relationships within our family and close circle, or even our relationship within to ourselves, there are applications, right? It's beneficial.
어다 듣지래 다 간조 단다 조데다 단다 되지래 돈래 되지가 다 자리 부서 줘봐지 요는 다 거의 내서 간지 지이나 했더니 소소가 놀러는 가야 보겠니 봐 좋아가서 왔어.
So, the tonglen that we practice can be applied as an inner practice so that it can be the antidote to any problem and the attendant upset that we encounter in samsara.
어다 거할 강에 체조지 때 내 나사대서 왔어. 어다 내 던지 두자 다 단다 받을 자와도 별 가와 이나요.
Yeah.
chen tan dra maybe ne tan je yong tu le nyo le tan dra ro tan lo ji mo mo re ta nyu nyu ma re.
So one of the most common and serious problems that we're going to encounter within samsara, of course, is illness. Illness is one of the most serious, and there are many stories about how when there were various pandemics, plagues and so forth in ancient India, in Tibet, there were practitioners of tonglen who through their practice of tonglen were able to overcome those illnesses.
어다 모라서 어다 던지 지. 야, 다 같은 동이 있으면서. 그절라마로와.
Kunzolama.
어다 당길라 방노지 견주 서거 공부 토발라. 다가 양 나로서 다 다두고 견주 서데 도자 다두래 되어래.
So, we understand that the actualization of the three jewels, actualizing those three jewels ourselves, this is an expression of the final goal of our cultivation.
다도 그 견주 서대 토차서는 다 보게 가서와 아니 다 예를 봐 제한테 마도 다 어떤 강의지 좀 해봐.
When we actualize the ultimate three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha ourselves, then all that remains is to contribute to the welfare of others. There's nothing more that we need to do in terms of cultivating ourselves.
어다 모자 하고 그러와스 어다 내는 간조 전주지세 토 대니를 대도 세세 토소나
Dundam.
손질 안 좋겠지나
Yep.
동복그 주세세 토 줄로거니까 대니 조론도 tullo거니까 대도 세세 토 그래스.
So then, in terms of how this understanding unfolds, we understand that we can speak about bodhicitta as two types, relative and ultimate. For most bodhisattvas, the relative bodhicitta is brought forth on the path of accumulation. And by the time the bodhisattva reaches the path of seeing and becomes an Arya bodhisattva, he or she has realized that ultimate bodhicitta.
다 동물의 존재 선발을 이렇게 지기는 대니 본질 다 들어가르래스. 먹그 세세 줄로 동물의 토베로 왔어.
Yeah. So the relative bodhicitta is accumulated first on the path of accumulation.
대도 세세 가디이나 지발에 단디네 돌로 동물 토게.
And ultimate bodhicitta is realized always on the path of seeing. Always on the path of seeing.
다 대도 세세 가디 토바도 다 코이시와도 저와도 가와도 나와 강가 봉사 다 되니라 다 강에 되는 요.
Once ultimate bodhicitta is generated within the mind, the samsaric sufferings of uncontrolled birth, death, aging, and illness are completely abandoned. They are completely abandoned when ultimate bodhicitta is realized.
다 던지기 다 존재셀 다 도모도 기치와로 왔어. 다 대도 세세 가디 토바 이는 견조서가 눈에 다 니뇽도 가디이나레스.
Ninyamdu kare.
겐데케조도 치케조.
Right. And so then at konso tonglam tobgirebes
야야. 대도 돌로 토게 되다 그
gendin kunchuk dang chogi kunchuk. So then also another thing that when the bodhisattva reaches this path of seeing, they actualize two of the three jewels, and the two are actualized simultaneously. The Sangha jewel and the Dharma jewel are actualized on that path of seeing.
다 테메이나 니티나 이제바레 더 돌로 토게 되는 니뇽도 가디이나레스.
And so this is the same whether we speak of the Mahayana or whether we speak of the Shravakayana or the Theravada teachings, right? At that moment, when one reaches the path of seeing, the Sangha and Dharma jewels are actualized oneself.
다 된다 시워즈나 동반잉에서도 쓰이나 지발해도 왔어. 동반잉에서도 또 오게 되라. 다 니뇽도 토바레스.
So, to simplify it, we could say that whoever develops that direct realization of emptiness accomplishes the actual Dharma jewel and the actual Sangha jewel.
당가로서 두반잉에서도 가디도서나 당가로서 수루루서서 겐데케주 안 놀로스 다 치케주 토바레스.
So that goes for ourselves too. Once we experience that direct realization of emptiness, we will bring forth the Dharma jewel within ourselves. We will actualize it within our mind. We will become an actual Sangha jewel.
단 리고 첨버스 토차와 다 등에 어떤지 지려야 되네. 이나 다도 견줘서 단다 주요.
So at that point, right, one has actualized the Dharma jewel and the Sangha jewel. This is a great result, but we have not yet reached the final or ultimate result.
그래서 다 던지고 뚜만잉에서도 또 차서 뚜만잉에서도 그새 코로 있나래. 코로 이제 숑바 니지 숑주게 새 강가 치케주로 다스요.
And another thing to understand is that once the wisdom realizing emptiness has been realized, right, and once one's mind has become the actual Dharma jewel, then the positive mental qualities from the method side that are abiding within that mind, love, compassion, and bodhicitta, they are Dharma jewels as well. So then you come to a very high-level understanding of why the Dharma jewel is the actual refuge. Yeah, Nyunjit. And so then at this point, one continues to cultivate, and at the point where the afflictive obscurations, along with their imprints or latencies, Geshe is describing these as like seeds that have been. Yeah. So he changes his mind. He doesn't want to say seed. He wants to emphasize imprints or latencies. After those are completely cleared away, then one actualizes Sangegi Kuncho. Then one actualizes the Buddha jewel, and then in this way one has actualized all three jewels within one's self. Yeah, and so we need to understand the stages that we need to cultivate to reach that point, and this is why we rely on the instructions such as is in words of my perfect teacher. And so here, we have a discussion of the features of samsara as well as the faults of samsara. That's the discussion that's happening in the chapter where we are.
This one?
So our problem is that because of the intensity of our attachment to samsara, we are never able to become bored or weary of samsara. That's the problem. Why is this? Because we aren't able to clearly comprehend the faults of samsara. We can't see them. So that's where this discussion takes us. Nguma gokor tangen dang zuma shegen dinso dapo chik jela konso chupo chagere. Yeah. Ale, yeah, sampotang. Yep. Tatare.
Zomboto nyamba yo mata te jite je shone cho katra to toshi shija to pe debe pacha to shudun zomba no cho gibi tela ba ngesa je seno se zana solon to je shijalo de shawa to je lo de mando me sha ro du yin ji ni ji she ba kona cher nga ji ye te temba ye ba no se ba tar jane jenyo me ba yo tama ye.
So we are reading just the very last sentence on page 51, going to page 52. Excellence and mediocrity are impermanent too. In worldly life, however authoritative and eloquent you may be, however erudite and talented, however strong and skillful, the time comes when those qualities decline. Once the merit you have accumulated in the past is exhausted, everything you think is contentious, and nothing you do succeeds. You're criticized from all sides. You grow miserable and everyone despises you. Some people lose whatever meager advantages they once had and end up without any at all. Others, once considered cheats and liars with neither talent nor common sense, later find themselves rich and comfortable, trusted by everyone, as esteemed as good and reliable. As the proverb says, aging frauds take pride of place. So this is just saying, that whatever one's position is within samsara, whether it's a good position or a bad position, there is no stability to be found in that. So we know also that whatever one's position is within samsara externally, what can happen is that if the internal merits maintaining that position are exhausted, then one can fall into a lower position very easily.
So it's
just that the text here is pretty clear. He's not sure how much explanation is necessary. Really. nganso chuluk denso drama song, right? So nganso dingela. Sorry, I jumped ahead one sentence, so I'll just read the sentence that Geshe read again. Others, once considered cheats and liars with neither talent nor common sense, later find themselves rich and comfortable, trusted by everyone, and esteemed as good and reliable people. As the proverb says, aging friends take pride of place.
ta yung macet la halebe tromba to maduja to di na yo macet tamala yo ko yawa jino ne lo ta tezit karsekar ya podung ine mare tene ina yo ko ya pishol na wach tsenela tene ne tsamo yo ndu.
So there's lots of people who are despised and seen as unreliable, and it's not necessarily that they have a change of heart, but through some internal circumstance, maybe there is a shift, and those people who once were despised are now sort of seen as good.
This one oh there do chisho ne jong tu so to de gembe loni shelo ge pisonju temba ge pi zapi sewaje cheten jite je jaja tonji li toyi ane sha ton yo cheme jizi sonju remba to chete yela chixiexebe lowe yu ceme ngomba to gaja xeba to cete denzi je kenbo yu ceme chege mombi pama xeba so yeji cete dipile kona xeba yu ceme tombi chi rewe kona doje chaba toba gom mocho chega lona samba xewa gombe dan jawa jaba so tama ye ba yembe tata zunge janwa keji mala tapa to temba goyo mejo lola ninju to shoshi se she.
So in religious life too, so we're halfway down 52. In religious life too, as the saying goes, in old age, sages become pupils, renunciates amass wealth, preceptors become heads of families. People who early in life renounced all worldly activities can be found busy piling up riches and provisions at the end. Others start out teaching and explaining the dharma, but end up as hunters, thieves, or robbers. Learned monastic preceptors, who in their youth kept all the Vinaya vows, may in their old age beget many children. On the other hand, there are also many people who spent all their earlier years doing only wrong, but who in the end devote themselves entirely to practicing the holy dharma, and either attain accomplishment, or if not, at least are on the path when they die and go to higher and higher rebirths.
Ta lama do tane lowe do sadu sei na yo ta chete la ngine chile gawo ta chimo page ya chi yo po ki na yo za ma chena ta ya chi de lo de mo do ne tane pa
So there are many examples, right, of lamas or preachers of the dharma who start out preaching the dharma, but then there is some sort of change, right, and they follow into the path of non-dharma. And then in this way, their previous efforts are wasted and many problems manifest through them falling into a path of non-dharma.
Ta te is no jing anzo lo ju te ji kale lo chi sin do chi lo don do lo la ba che me ba sha te pe so ta ya ta shi lo shi ya te je chimbo ren do.
So that's why we speak about, in the Lojong teachings, turning the mind to dharma. Lo chugi lam la joy de ni pati
lo chi sin do chi lo don do.
And then, so if the mind goes towards dharma, then that dharma becomes a path, and that path is without obstacles. So the Lojong teachings mention that for this reason. Yeah, and we can see that each of those three steps is progressively more difficult. Turning the mind to dharma initially is the easier step. Cultivating the path more difficult. So they all depend upon one another, right? We have to cultivate that stability. And not so much need to comment on this because we see this case, right, with so many dharma teachers. So no need to comment on this. Yeah. So if we have our own understanding of conviction and the disadvantages of samsara, if we have our own conviction of renunciation or definite emergence, then we can remain stable on the dharma path.
로르도 가와 이나 요아 ninju pasi pheto ko mares
Pusim sana?
ninju pasa wasare ngazo
Right.
kolila wa pen
So in the Lamrim text and in many other places it says, don't let your renunciation, your definite emergence, be like the hairs on the goosebumps. In other words, when you're cold, the hair sticks up, but just for a moment and then it goes back down again. So don't be like that.
다 mombores yores ninju pasa wa 다 ko an ninju ya lila wa shi
So there are many examples of that, right? People who cultivate the teachings and they develop some definite emergence, some renunciation, but it's just like the hairs on the arm with the goosebumps. They apply themselves for a little bit, but then they lose interest, the renunciation declines, and so forth. Nganso sukme kam kari chine drosan di drawa kuma something.
Ngaro sodo ter tanda jinya ter was ha ina yo.
Yeah.
Jodo zume ina yo.
Yeah.
Niju tembo che to me a iza.
Le.
To mani ngesa to ya no masetal ravi ya.
So, we should understand the opportunity we have in this human realm if we maintain that definite emergence. If we think of those devas, those gods of the form and formless realm, right? Because of the state there, they are not able to develop any renunciation and they are not able to realize emptiness. So it is said that within the form and formless realms, none of those devas, none of those beings are able to reach the path of seeing in the form or formless realm. So within the desire realm, right, we can newly reach the path of seeing. We can bring forth that wisdom realizing emptiness. So these are some of the positive qualities of this desire realm.
So the
form and the formless realms, right, the happiness or bliss they experience is much more profound than what we have, but as a basis for practice, our rebirth is more favorable. So why can they not realize emptiness or reach the path of seeing? It's because they aren't able to develop the renunciation necessary to develop the mind that definitely strives towards liberation. The mind that strives towards liberation. So they can't bring forth that mind of definite emergence because the like the sukha, the happiness that they experience within those realms is very refined, and also the realms themselves are very pleasing. So really difficult to bring forth renunciation. So, the story of many of you be familiar with the story of Venerable Ananda, right? So because he was the constant attendant of the Buddha, he was always relatively sort of happy, right? He had a good position and, sort of vocation and whatever. Because of that, right, he wasn't really able to develop the same level of dissatisfaction or disgust with samsara and the same level of renunciation as the other monks. So at the end, by the time that most of the other monks were foe destroyers, he still had not had that realization of emptiness. Yeah. So we know that as seeing this, right, and understanding that it was necessary for Ananda to reach this realization, to be able to orally recollect the teachings of the Buddha, right? One of the other bhikshus, I think it was Kashyapa, he sort of told the Sangha he needs to develop renunciation, so we need to ice him out. We need to sort of show him cold expressions and so forth. So, and also, in addition to those expressions, they sort of focused on his so-called mistakes, and they weren't really serious mistakes, but they said, when the Buddha was around, you didn't attend him well, you did this wrong, you didn't take care of him properly, and so forth, and because of that, then you need to leave the Sangha. So essentially, he was like excommunicated from the Sangha community.
어다 거한테는 단님보 메타지렌도 서다 종화되냐 받대 몸도 와서는 되네 코시나 지금 저 연주 비 인주 tempo 돈 거자게 다 레라보다 세나만데 타바 토바르바스
And so then, having sort of been disfellowshipped in this way, Venerable Ananda left the Sangha. He went into the forest, and then sort of reflecting on this experience, he started to see the dissatisfactory nature of samsara. He was able to meditate on renunciation, and in this way was able to efficiently reach realization.
So,
and then after he achieved the state of a foe destroyer, his disfellowshipping was cancelled, and he was again invited to join the Sangha. Yes. And so the reason that it was so important for him to reach this realization was in part because he had to recite all of the teachings of Lord Buddha that he could recollect, because at that time they had not been written down. And so it was said that in order to establish the satsana, the teaching, there had to be 500 Arya Sangha present. In other words, 500 foe destroyers present. But there was only 499 without Ananda. Yeah. So it was really important that last one to reach the 500, to reach the state of a foe destroyer, was Venerable Ananda. Also because he was close to the Buddha, but because of his prodigious memory. He was able to remember all of the teachings of the Buddha that he had heard. So, the Ananda was Lord Buddha's nephew, but when the Buddha asked if he would be his attendant, Ananda insisted that the Buddha make some promises. And one of the promises that he insisted was that if he was not within earshot, the Buddha was not permitted to preach the dharma. And so there were several promises that the Buddha had to make, but this is one of them, and the Buddha agreed to this promise, not to preach the dharma if Ananda was not in earshot. Dukar. Ale. So are any of you familiar with a deity called the Dza Patrul? I think that's how you say it, the white umbrella goddess. So Geshe was saying that one of the teachings that Venerable Ananda was not present for, sort of against this promise, was the Sutra of the White Umbrella Deity. And this is why it is said that the Sutra of the White Umbrella Deity manifested from the crown protrusion, from the Ushnisha of the Buddha, rather than being spoken from the mouth of the Buddha, to honor the spirit of that promise. Yeah, so I guess I just thought that's kind of a fun thing to share, connected with this promise that the Buddha made to Ananda. Nganso Jiangshi Gisem Tanda Nganso Jiangshi Gisem Ngachana Daljenchi Paiba. Ale.
Setela dipile chimbozo kiyinayo. Hakasarawa semelo uchin nyole shenela pangene loto batani tam momboshi warela.
Sorry. Go on.
Chegtela.
Yeah.
Setela ta dipile chachi mozo kimi.
Yep.
An chegemelo uchilun juenela. Alevit loto se tobon roketni yarawas.
Tambo digbo mambo sadene Se tets mato mepe kapla gyur huwa dro.
Teze ma tsena ma tseme sana nagra
Ale, yeah.
ta lo jo she nyole she nel tse to bon roke.
So there are many examples also of practitioners who in the beginning of their lifetimes, they were involved in many unwholesome, negative activities, accumulated great negative karma, but then later on, they come to the dharma and there is a change, and then by the end of their life, they reach a level of realization of the dharma. Right. So the biggest example of this that most of us will be familiar with is Lord Milarepa, of course. So then he, of course, was in one lifetime able to go from a sinner to achieving full enlightenment. So Lord Milarepa is sort of the most dramatic example, but there are many others who achieved similar things. Sumpa Jangshu Kiseng Kiepe Labja Tempa La Dire. Ah. Yeah. Marabe. Yeah, Tajayi. Yeah, Tembo. Yeah, so we will now turn to the discussion of bodhicitta. Details rosarebe. Ditar togma mepa? Kaudi. So take a moment. Okay, yes, okay, so we are on page 222. We are in the section considering others as equal to oneself. And so Geshe is saying we are just at the sentence where it says, we believe in an I where there is no I, and a self when there is no self, and we make that self the sole object of our affection. So that's where we've left off.
Tina tata gite tata rongi tido nomba toje de rola dewa kona de dunga jan nomba na zo dunga jan nomba na ji jo mende tana lila chama su ba to meto luwa zo yo cha de dunga maze ba she ne acha cha se shi se maze ba jane shingi sina yo de ma ta la she do cha bo shi lo go to no de nyane shi de zu semo ji gi din de jane ji gi she ji jo shi se se zhong da de yong xie dong ge wong ge semo yong yong da wa xie la re da da pa chi shi se ba la di ba me nyong ban de jo shi se ban de tong che ka long xie dong ge long wa yan be nya wa din jo de shi je ma nong wa yi.
So we want to be happy constantly and never to have any kind of suffering. The moment anything unpleasant happens to us, we find it unbearable. Even a pinprick or the tiny burn of a spark makes us cry out in pain. We cannot stand it. If a little louse should bite us on the back, we fly into a rage. We catch that louse, put it in one of our thumbnails, and crush it hard with the other. And long after we have already killed it, we go on grinding our nails together in anger. Most people these days see no harm in killing a louse, but since it is invariably done out of anger, it is a sure cause for rebirth in the rounding up and crushing hell. We should be ashamed to find such small discomforts so hard to bear, and to react in a way that causes so much pain to another being. Loso. So we speak about these various hells where there are sufferings of heat and cold and being crushed and so forth, but the principle here is actually most of us would see like killing a small louse or another insect as not a very big deal, right? And nominally, it is just one louse or one insect, but the problem is that when the killing is done, this is conjoined with a very strong afflicted mind, especially one of anger. And because it is done with this mind of anger, then that negativity becomes very heavy. So another thing to mention here is that, you know, in some religious traditions, they don't really consider fish to be sentient beings. Like you'll find some traditions where they say that fish are like the fruit of the Ganga, right? And so then people are fishing and even sometimes not for food, for fun. But this fishing, right, it is connected with a mind of great attachment. And because it is connected with a mind of great attachment, even killing a small fish can become a relatively heavy thing. So Geshe realizes that to ask everybody to abandon meat completely, this is probably not possible for everyone, but what is possible is for as much as we can to reduce our intake of that. Yeah.
Los. Rola dunga chunga tezo mazepa ngaroso dunga chushi me ite so no don lozo page show tenizo was.
So here the point is we should be ashamed to find such small discomfort so hard to bear, right? We see that this is really the case. Even just a little bit of pain, this causes us tremendous distress.
But chushi in the senje chushi in the koros page no just that and to tonga was. O there's condition koroso de womeba.
And also you can see with other beings, like beings in the animal realm, right? If you just poke them a little bit or cause them a tiny bit of discomfort, their expression becomes very distressed. So they are just as troubled by the pain and suffering as we are. Listen.
More cha so agazaro. Kosanje sejen to tonje rola dewa tonje dunga nachi jo mande paron ton rawa konai.
Just like us, all beings of the three worlds want to be happy and to escape any suffering too. But although they want to be happy, they have no idea that happiness comes from practicing the 10 positive actions. Although they do not want to suffer, they devote their efforts to the 10 harmful actions which cause suffering. So this type of reflection is a reflection is to bring forth a feeling of equanimity. In other words, that we are equal to each other, sentient beings, in that we all share this same basic wish of not wishing for even minor sufferings and wanting every happiness. So then after we develop this, we see how this wish, right, we see the sameness, right, the equality of ourself and others. We then reflect, myself, I am just one person. Others are countless, are numberless.
Kenyaji chewa shiba yambe mombe janwo to chipe magesenje tonje rodo chewa meba zeishon lujo to shuri zeba shite danye nyomba ni to gomba shago.
So continuing, So, although they do not want to suffer, they devote all their efforts to the 10 harmful actions which bring about suffering. What they wish for and their attempts to attain it are therefore completely at odds, and they suffer all the time. Of all those beings, there is not a single one who has not, at some moment throughout time without beginning, been apparent to us. Now that we have been accepted as disciples by an authentic teacher, now that we have taken up the true dharma and can distinguish what is profitable from what is detrimental, we ought to be caring lovingly for all our old mothers enslaved by their own confusion, and should stop seeing any difference between them and ourselves. Putting up with their ingratitude and prejudices, we should meditate on the absence of any difference between friends and enemies. So these are the essential instructions. We see that these essential instructions are not easy to put into practice. For this reason, not only do we need to contemplate and meditate on these instructions, we need to pray and visualize receiving the blessings of the holy beings to be able to achieve these instructions, because these instructions are not easy to actualize. This is why in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, they are called the secret precepts by Shantideva. So it's not a tantric practice, right? Equalizing and exchanging self and others, yet Shantideva describes it as a secret practice. So, of course, it's not easy to practice in its sort of full expression right away, but there are ways to approach and think about this, to think about friends and enemies, for example, and why we hold on to these categories, to let go of those categories, because if we hold on to these prejudices, it only causes us to develop suspicion, to develop doubt and difficulty. How if we are able to see both friends as enemies as the same as close to me, that this will really help to solve a lot of problems, and how they are close to me because they are essentially the same as me in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. And also to see how these beings who are just like our parents, they are also confused, right? They don't understand that the cause of happiness is virtue and how to cultivate it. They don't understand that the cause of suffering is non-virtue and how to abandon it. At the moment, in our temporary situation, we possess this knowledge, so we want to cultivate closeness with them and try to help them. So, whatever good or useful things you want for yourself, others want them just as much. So just as you work hard at bringing about your own happiness and comfort, always work hard for others' happiness and comfort too. Just as you would try to avoid even the slightest suffering for yourself, strive to prevent others from having to suffer even the slightest.
Yeah. So
here's an argument that we're putting all of this effort into trying to achieve happiness for ourselves. So since we are bringing forth all of this great effort, why don't we also dedicate to helping others achieve happiness as well?
Oh yeah. This one. Rola dunga janamba chamo zoyo ponwala zembatar yanyo dunga chamo tsache ponwala ze rola deshe to noshe so yana gawa tar yela deshe to noshe so yapala ni tapane gawa gom.
So just as you would feel going back one sentence, just as you would try to avoid even the slightest suffering for yourself, strive too to prevent others having to suffer even the slightest. Just as you would feel pleased about your own well-being and prosperity, rejoice from your heart when others are well and prosperous too. Right, and so be very careful though what moments of happiness of others we are rejoicing in. It's important to have some discernment here. So if others are killing or harming others and experience happiness because of that, we don't want to rejoice in that particular kind of happiness. If they achieve something good through their own effort and work, through working hard at something, and it's not harming others, then without jealousy, right, we should really rejoice in that. How wonderful that they were able to experience that success. May they be able to maintain that success in a stable way into the future.
Dona kosan je senje tongje rondo cheme de tini tosonga chado yenje dewa baji depi ta kona lelemba giba yete ji tomba sonje la chumba rebe zene chenje dongo chichige chuba shishi be cheno chatan de bate yeno jo tetan de ba yime dedo yo ji su.
So, in short, see no distinction between yourself and all living creatures of the three worlds. Make it your sole mission to find ways of making every one of them happy now and for all time. When Trungpa Sinachen asked him for a complete instruction in a single sentence, Padampa Sanje replied, "Whatever you want, others want as much, so act on that. Completely eradicate all those wrong attitudes based on attachment and aversion, which make you reject others and care only for yourself, and think of yourself and others as being entirely equal." So these Geshe loves these quotes he was saying, because when you have these like essential instructions of these holy beings, they are so short, but they are so powerful, those pith instructions. So Geshe wants to read just a little bit from the next section. Look at a again. Konda konso nawe dunge dang kala mepa dang den so didros kaute dingalate. Sorry. So he only read the first half of that sentence. So completely eradicate. So I jumped ahead of him. Completely eradicate those wrong attitudes based on attachment and aversion, which make you reject others and care only about yourself, and think about yourself and others as equal. So we have concluded considering others as equal to oneself, which means that next week we will begin in the section 1.2, exchanging oneself and others. So we have to think that we have always been deceived by self-cherishing, and we have never been able to bring about So we have to see how we have been deceived by self-cherishing up until now. We have not been able to bring forth the mind that cherishes others, that self-cherishing is the root of suffering and difficulty, and that this attitude of cherishing others is the root of true happiness. So if we want to have a peaceful mind and a body that is at ease, then we want to be able to practice the attitude of exchanging oneself and others. So because bodhicitta is such a powerful mind, we will not be able to bring this forth if we don't train in preliminary instructions, such as equalizing and exchanging self and others. Important to remember that. Yeah, and equalizing and exchanging. And so when we look at the equalizing and exchanging self and others instruction, this is said to be the instruction for sharp faculty practitioners who arise bodhicitta, whereas the 7-point cause and effect instruction is for limited faculty practitioners. So we always talk about lojong or mind training, but we could say that the very essence of lojong or mind training is training the mind, right, to equalize that sense of self and others, and eventually to exchange self and others.
So me da sara wote.
Yeah. So that would be like the main mind training instruction, not the only, but the main one.
Wata tandijire ndu sa tenda ru so so ta ke ban jo ji se ba chwa go ya isa kanga la de menga di de menga ji ji ju ni jo so ta ga je so yo ya res.
Dajin Nyamje Dang, Nyamdu Sone, right? So all of us, right, we want to, if we're aspiring to be a bodhisattva, we want to be able to bring forth this bodhicitta. So Geshe is saying that actually the best thing, ideally, is that you train in both instructions, the 7-point cause and effect, and equalizing and exchanging self and others. And there's texts that explain this in 11 points, in 13 points, right? Ways that you can incorporate both instructions.
Ta tenda zo te ta nga ya sho ju se to go ya ite de no ne so se to ga ji chu di was.
Yeah.
Right.
So as somebody who is striving to develop bodhicitta, then we can look at these instructions and say, like, which of these instructions are more powerful for me? Which of these instructions resonate more with our personal experience, right? And we can emphasize those that work best for us. So we are going to leave it here at 1.2, exchanging oneself and others. So we are halfway down to 23. So we also want to have the blessings to actualize this of Venerable Tara. So we want to cover at least one of the verses of Venerable Tara. So I am using Lama Zopa Rinpoche's translation of the praises to the 21 Taras, and we are in the second verse on page 13. So there is absolutely no deception when the benefits of Tara are described. We can absolutely receive her help if we do our best from our side. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Geshe is recollecting a story about an older woman in Ladakh. And this older woman, she had become blind. So she was not able to engage in her practice as before. But because she had memorized the 21 praises to Tara, even in her blindness, she would recite these praises again and again. Yeah. So you know, her doctor had said this, there was nothing they could do for her, and she had accepted this, and so she felt that there was nothing for her to do except continuously recite these praises to the 21 Taras. And of course, reciting this is something that is common in all segments of Tibetan and Himalayan society. So she recited these praises of 21 Taras continuously throughout the day, and then one night she fell asleep and she had a dream where she met a green lady, and the green lady told her, "Don't worry, I will protect you." She woke up and her sight was restored. She was able to see again. So this is not something that happened at some distant point in the past. This is a recent incident that happened that shows the efficacy of Tara practice. Yeah, and so many other such scenarios of Venerable Tara directly helping people. Chugugin. Yeah. Chakse la yi tso nang gya po.
Oh, yeah, that shansa la chugupa, shansa la yi tso no jabo, la dong mo ji dem, gani ko chagawa ji zedong, malong ya ba sema.
Yeah. So then, verse 19, homage to you, Tara, upon whom the kings of the assembled gods, the gods themselves, and all Kannadas rely, whose magnificent armor gives joy to all, you who dispel all disputes and bad dreams. So this is Tara, who completely liberates from suffering, or Tara, who burns through suffering. Yeah, so that's a better translation. So number 19, I would say, is Tara, who blazes through all suffering. Tara, who blazes through all suffering. Yeah. And she is white in color. So it's the same as we recite this verses with what was explained in the other verse. We imagine that as we recite, there's a beautiful white lotus with a moon disk upon it, and upon this sits this white Tara, the Tara who completely blazes through all suffering. Yeah, I offer, so as we begin to recite the verse, I offer prostration to you, and then we think, why are you worthy of homage? One of the reasons that you are worthy of homage is you are relied on by the kings of the gods. So we think that all of these kings of the Deva or godlike realms, whether the desire realm gods, the form realm gods, or the formless realm gods, as well as the all of them offer homage to you. So because all of these very powerful beings offer homage to you, right, this shows that you are very powerful, and I offer homage to you as well. So that's why it emphasizes kings of the gods here. We know that within the 6 realms of samsara, the devas, or the godlike beings, are considered the most powerful, and even the kings amongst these beings offer homage out of respect to Tara. Yeah. Yeah, so then the next one, so then we have the kings of the assembled gods, and then we have the gods themselves. So not only their kings, but all of the other gods or devas as well rely upon Tara. Yeah. Yeah. 하고. Yeah. I like 타당 람보첸당. So Geshe was saying that the Kannadas they're also devas or godlike beings, and he's explaining that they're not, of course, exactly the same as these beings that are considered Chokyong or Dharma protectors, but they have a similar appearance. So they're like, how do I say this word? Anthropomorphic beings, sometimes that have like a human-like body, and they might have like a horse's head or a bull's head or things like this. This is how some understand Kannadas. Yeah. So in this case, they are worldly Kannadas, just to be clear. So because they are so precious, we offer homage. They offer homage to you. Also, in addition to that, the radiance of this brilliantly blazing Tara who blazes through suffering, its radiance can quell any quarrels we've fallen into, and also nightmares and other bad experiences like that. Yeah, gochasana chak. Yes. Right. So here, magnificent armor. Geshe is clarifying that this is not like the armor visualization where we place like the illuminated discs on our body, like in highest yoga tantra. Nganzo gonda lameju gocha mares, yine kareta
라메
mares.
지는 고차세나 디케자들 와스.
Yeah, yeah.
데테 마레스.
Loso.
템볼 거야레스.
Yeah. This is an armor of perseverance, so an armor of stability. So not the same as that other armor.
오 단저거도 어디거도와.
Loso.
다 라이 잡어서 알가서 두리세나 뭔데 메스 또나. 라이 뭐 자절라. 아주 너지 찔라셰자라 찔라셰. timba
Timba.
ko
Yeah.
timba ta shen no bo chen no she de ya res
Le,
hai bo
right.
ja ji de
Jachi.
ja ji ti la she se me ta par ko ro min
Kale kale sundam. Yabo como son kiene. Ming.
hai bo ja ji la min ka ri ta gre se na
Lai wangpo.
ja ji do chumba
I have no idea.
shu shu chang no la yo ro was hai bo ja ji ka chu ji no le
Jajin. Jajin. Yeah.
ja ji
Tsangpa.
chumba do ja ji do
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Geshe is referencing these gods to I haven't memorized the names of the 15 directional protectors. This is the problem. I see a couple of Vajrayāna folks here, so maybe you'll remember. So if I say this wrongly, feel free to drop into the chat. But anyways, the kings of the gods are sometimes understood as beings like Shakra, Indra, Brahma, and so forth.
ta mi te jil me ni bo ya res ti se yo nge lo ji
Ale.
ta ji ma shi
So Geshe will tell a story related to them next time because I need to get the vocabulary for this. Sorry, I didn't have a warning. It will come next time. He's saying we did that in Vajrayāna. We haven't gotten to that part yet. It's not true. Yeah, so Geshe said that in the commentaries on Vajrayāna, it gives meanings for the names of these various deities. But obviously, if I'm going to translate that, we need to prepare. So we'll share this later on.
Chuguba.
So we are up to the 19th of the 21 taras. So 20 and 21 will come in our last installment of Words of My Perfect Teacher next week. Yeah, so Geshe said the reason that he left at 19 is because we had been mistaken thinking this was the last installment of this round of Words of My Perfect Teacher, but there's one more week. So the remaining 2 taras, we'll finish those next week. Don't worry, we'll finish them. Yeah, and so Geshe is just sharing that after next Sunday, the following Sunday after that, so 2 Sundays from now, we will go back to the sacred words of Manjushri, the 5th Dalai Lama's Lamrim, with glossing by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, along with Recognizing My Mother, a Song of the Profound View by Changya Rilpe Dorje, which is a very nice text. So thank you very much. Let us lift our hearts and dedicate the merits. And of course, after dedication, if you need to get on with your day, please do. If you want to hang for questions, please feel free to stay. Changjo semjo rinpoche maje panam jeju richi chewa nyamba meba yang gone kundu kawa sho toni tawa rinpoche maje panam jeju richi chewa nyamba meba yang gone kundu pewa sho jambe pao jida kyamba dang kundu sambo deyan dejinte deda kungi jesu dalo chir gewa dide tamche ratungo tusun shebe gewa tamche gi ngowa gangna chodu ngapa de dagi gewe tsawa dikun kyang sambo choji ratu ngowa gi gangri rawe kowe shingam dir pendan dewa malu jungwe ne chenre ziwan tenzin jatso yi shape side badu tenjoji. Okay, so we can open the floor for questions. I think it looks like Carol is first and then Deki Lee. So go ahead, Carol.
Hello, thank you very much. Geshe said they were lesser, middling, and most powerful Tonglen.
Yep.
Now, is this according to the stages or power of our own realization, or is he talking about different methods?
Yes, okay, gotcha, Carol. Yep. Nganso gen la tonglen chungu dring chempo dabuchi do chungu dring dang chempo di nganso nanglo la gi tokpa la tene ming tagires konso tonglen gitap rang la tene ming din so tagires.
나도 말해 미 단다 담이 다이다 가세 치매 당간조 레 동베이 가르뇨레 시기좀 발라들이 다 있어.
Yeah, so Geshe gave these explanation of the small, middling, and great according to the stages of which one would approach Tonglen as a beginning practitioner and then on from that. Herna?
릴라보도 되네 대세 다 갈래 가와 되네 딜레조 갈래 가와
Lela posena soso Tonglen soso mo.
다 소소 미 강에도 던지 슈소나 대 강에 용조 단디 그 고쳐 봐쇼 라고 강에 강가 하고 살아
Di chungudi.
어
Yep, yep.
다 릴라쇼 대 다시 대 중에서나
So an example of the smaller or easiest practice of Tonglen would be for a beginning practitioner where we say like, I'm experiencing this illness or this other problem. May I experience this, and in other ways may other sentient beings not meet with this suffering. This would be like a small practice of Tonglen. Jingjing?
다시 대워 셰 토야 다 릴라쇼 대 릴라고 돈이 다 되지 요스나
And so Geshe said he assigned this like the small, not because it's inferior, but because it is the easiest to practice, right? This is one of the easiest to practice.
배도는 첨보 릴라고 다시 토야 간조 단단히
So it's easy to practice, and that makes it doable for all of us in any moment. So that's why he called this like the small one. We could say the accessible.
다 소소 여보 가르치고 이나 대 노지스탄로 뭐 유조 생제 유조를 다 드네 와쇼라고 가세터
The other side of this is when things are going well for us, right? When we are happy and satisfied, we think, may all sentient beings experience this similar happiness, not only myself. This is another easy practice of Tonglen.
다 강에 체주 간디스 다 강에다마도 요하러와스 다 드리시오 이나 다대 노조가 강에 좋은로야 노조가 강에 되게 찬다고 다 고치 와쇼 소소소
Dilasan, that younger. Okay, and then so and so once again, so yeah. So it's this idea of whatever happiness we have, those good experiences. May all beings have this, right? I give this happiness to all beings, and when that suffering happens, we think through my experiencing it, may sentient beings not have to experience it.
다 디가 강에 추른로야 강에 디 소소는 셀 니네 비슈치 원내 마도와 다 비할래야지 가레스
And so this method also, Geshe is saying, it's especially helpful for beginners because this way of thinking helps us disempower the problem so that it is no longer so disturbing to our mind.
다 리디스는 뭐다 텔레테스 때로와 나이스 연지 보게 강에 강가 칠레네 다 보게 다 대배자노도 요 말와스 데 소설 칠레야 되고 뭐든 다 노칼은 자야와다 이노야 근데 소소가 다 대시긴 되고 어디 되고 파제야.
The middling way, right, would be to, when we do the Tonglen visualization, rather than imagining taking on the problems of sentient beings into ourselves, as this may be difficult in the beginning, we can imagine that those problems absorb into emptiness and disappear, or that they fade into space or the sky like a rainbow. This is a middling application of Tonglen.
어때 영화나 다 니집이다 보고 야마도 니지가 돈에 보게 누가 두와서 그 야로 왔어야.
Yeah, and but even 가리 간수 눈에 레비아, 좋아.
메메메 파슈데 누가 매봐서 야서 소소는 파슈데는 니지야 보고 야로 왔어.
And also to understand, though, to be effective in this middling practice, we have to have a measure of compassion, right? Because it's only compassion that will make us really have a sincere wish that they be without that suffering.
어때 노지도 싫어 수고요 말 왔어. 당이다 가서 대 타치스라.
아니 쳔포디?
아 대서 그 근데디로 뭐 요아레스.
야야.
대 노지도 빼자노라 요 말 싫어 수고요 말. 배도 소소 레 마토나.
야야.
젤레네 노칼. 먼저 그치다 매봐 차나 오때 대워 두았어.
So Geshe said this instruction is not the one that you finally find in the text, that you commonly find in the texts, right? It's usually the full expression of the instruction. But this instruction, Geshe shares here as the middling because it can be a very effective bridge to the later practice. If we don't feel capable to actually take on the suffering, we can imagine it dissolving into space or the sky.
다 rimba ndiji sena made yungju ndiji yashu te.
Yeah.
파 니지 미바 짜드 때네.
Yeah.
파슈고 둥아 강에 칠래.
Yeah.
소소를 칭년에 칠래.
Yeah.
레는 소소고 롱치 인자도 콘트로도 녀무 가리나 딩걸 파. 나저 마리 발라.
So another one, which we could also say is a middling practice, but maybe a little bit more advanced, but also very beneficial, is that when we visualize taking away that suffering of sentient beings, we take it into ourselves. But rather than imagining that this causes us to actually experience that suffering, we imagine that the suffering that we breathe in eliminates the self-cherishing mind, which can be visualized as a stone at the heart, or eliminates the ignorance grasping at the self, and so forth. We can also imagine that it we breathe in that suffering and it acts as an antidote to whatever illness we may be facing, to whatever difficulties or suffering we are facing that we are holding on to at our heart, that it completely dissolves that away. Right. And even this middling practice, right, it can act as an antidote to self-cherishing. It can act as an antidote to self-grasping ignorance, and therefore it's actually quite powerful, even though Geshe is calling it middling. Yeah. So the last one is simply the full expression of this, right? A complete willingness to take on that suffering of sentient beings based upon this mind of great compassion, and even being willing to experience that suffering oneself for their sake, if that's the only way for them to be free of it. Also, being completely willing to relinquish one's happiness and give it away to all those sentient beings. This is the great expression of Tonglen. So the true practitioner of Tonglen, they don't need any caveats or protection, right? It's just that complete willingness to take on that suffering and to give away that happiness. This person's already very developed, right? So they have that courageousness to just be willing to take on that suffering without any doubt, If it's going to help them be free from that suffering, let me take it on. I'll take it on for them. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the kind of practitioner, like the one about the story of the Lama who didn't want to go to the Pure Land. He saw the sign of going to the Pure Land at death as being inauspicious because he wanted to go to the lowest realm of samsara to benefit the sentient beings there. And we're talking about a person who really meant that, not somebody who was saying it to impress other people and look good. Somebody who really meant that. Yeah, not just to say it to impress people. Yeah. So these are kind of different ways that we could posit these various levels of taking and giving practice. So it's just gradual increments of preparing our mind, essentially. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So Geshe said, we can take the psychology of Tonglen into our life generally too. So for example, when his friend Geshe Tempa loses money to a pickpocket or something, he thinks, may whoever has that money be able to have full benefit from that. May it provide them with happiness. So that is a way to apply Tonglen to that kind of situation. Yeah. Otherwise, we get stuck in a loop. Like, who was it that the pickpocket was? I think about how many things that they, took away from me, and then we get angry, and then we fall into this way of thinking. That's not going to help us get back the money. is it? Right? So this is a more beneficial way to think about it. Lo so chu ma bu. Yeah. So that's a good way to sort of think about and talk about it. Chu ma bu. So Deki Lee, go ahead.
My understanding is that Cindy Prokop had a question in chat before I raised my hand.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead, Deki Lee. We'll get to Cindy Prokop.
Okay,
No worry. We have time for everybody. Yeah,
okay,
we'll stay later if we have to a little bit. No worries. Go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
Back to the story about Ananda. Okay. Let's see. I've got it written down. Which around the renunciation to discuss for samsara and Ananda's story. Are you suggesting because he didn't have renunciation, Ananda had no realization of bodhicitta because he didn't have the renunciation to do this?
No, it was a foe destroyer. He was trying to become a foe destroyer. So that's not bodhicitta, Deki Lee. That's a Hinayana foe destroyer.
Okay, so all 999 were all aspiring to be foe destroyers.
Yes. Yeah.
Then who was aspiring to be on the Mahayana path when the Buddha was alive?
Okay, fair question. Dene nganso kungao di rwa ko dra chomba thomaswa karin sen ngejung semla yomares rwa ngejun tempo yomares, sorry, right? Okay, tempo yena karina. Dene punsub zoba meba. Dene ko gubshu go gu dabuchi gyores chiton go gire duas ine konso chacha ine konso chacha wa dra chompa lebya tabji chegyores tompa chomdende yope kapla jangshu sempa chagen suyeresa
Mesha ta shoji samba shomba do ta teji nomba te di warwas mota ta shoji samba teji ta
So during these stories, we don't see the bodhisattvas explicitly included in the regular, Geshe was saying, in the regular Sangha of the Buddha, right? There are like incremental sort of bodhisattvas attending various things, like Maitreya and Manjushri, like we see them mentioned. Yeah. Yine konso nga chiklar na jigirwa. Konso di so gedunpa kola chik lagire duas. Roa jamship sempa denso konso namgin la tabugi jamship sempa roa. Gedunpa denso konso mangchewa dra chompa dang denso roa.
Yeah,
yine ko triwa di trapa denso chatsang dra chompa togi yores, like kare chene jangshu gisem dang denso drogi omares. Ko triwa tambo di re kungao ko jangshu gisem metsam ko dra chompa tob tu maswa. Yine ngala payin dra chompa tobi la jangshu gisem gogi omare roa. Chetan roa. Yeah. Dene jangshu gisem kea tu gen trapa gi nangla suyores tabuchi triwa. Yeah, so I'm just clarifying this. So I was just checking, Deki Lee, if what I said to you was correct, because I don't want to mislead people, of course, that bodhicitta is not required to become a foe destroyer. So that's absolutely correct, Geshe said, because a foe destroyer is that direct realization of emptiness without bodhicitta. And I said, okay, but were there bodhisattvas? And Geshe said, yes. Like in the Mahayana Sutras, you hear about lots of bodhisattvas who are present. Avalokita, there's 8. Let's just make it easier. There's those 8 primary bodhisattvas, and that list is always available. But then I asked, in terms of the monks, were there bodhisattvas? And Geshe said, no, not as far as he understands. The Sangha assembly at the time of the Buddha were manifesting this aspect as arahat disciples, as foe destroyer disciples.
Yes.
So what's the reason for this? That the Mahayana Sutras were not widely proclaimed. they were only proclaimed to specific students, whereas the Shravakayana Sutras were proclaimed to the entire Sangha assembly.
Thank you. That leads to another question I have.
Sure.
So if not many or all of us, or even here in the room, have not realized renunciation yet, are we just pretending to be on a Mahayana path without having that realization? Or are we all doing a fake it till you make it path?
Nganso ngenjung di mena dene tekshengi lam droya yores yomares. Dene nganso mangchewa tanda chu nyengen mangchewa ngenjung mena nga tekpa chempo nyamlen chepa yin labia di tets zuma dapo chagirebesa.
미다 즈마 차그레세도 로요 말와 다 된다 롱이네 시토야요 말
So Geshe would say it's not that we are a false Mahayana practitioner. That may be very sincere, but your point does draw attention to the fact that we don't actually enter the Mahayana path itself without renunciation. You do need renunciation or definite emergence to enter the Mahayana path. But that doesn't mean that we can't do our best to practice love, to practice compassion, and for that to be extremely beneficial. It just means they're not yet pathway minds.
But
without a realization of definite emergence, actually entering and ascending through the 5 Mahayana paths, you're correct. That's not possible. Yeah. And that's true for the Hinayana or the Theravada practitioners as well, right? To enter that progression of the 5 paths, definite emergence or renunciation is absolutely essential.
Okay, so we're dancing in the meantime.
Then also nekap chik shabtro tangi dua da bu chik ngane zumi tumna.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Geshe said that we're still doing tremendously beneficial things, right? And we're studying and practicing and bringing forth joyous effort and so forth. But yes, we haven't officially entered the path until that comes forth. So Geshe said that, your question makes him think of the advice of Kunu Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen to a young His Holiness 14th Dalai Lama. Which is that, so I was just saying, because I thought maybe there's some new people, you don't know this. Geshe's told it often, but anyway. So, His Holiness asked him, is it really possible to bring forth this mind of bodhicitta? And he said, not only is it possible, it's not something that you need millions and billions of dollars to do, like a nuclear bomb, which is in the world. It is more easy and possible to attain than that. If we have a mind, we understand that necessarily that mind is capable of transformation, especially in our current situation. So really important to remember that. Officially entering the path or not, that's another question, and we need a lot of stability to get there, right? So that's a fair statement.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dekili. I think Donna is the next person I see. Do you want to go ahead, Donna? And then I see Annie as well, and then we'll come to Dave to read the text questions. Go ahead, Donna.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to start off by saying I really appreciated the teaching today. It resonated with me in terms of reminding us to teach all beings as equal, human and animal, because we all have the capacity equally to feel fear, to feel pain, and to want to avoid suffering. So I appreciate that. My question relates to the story Geshe told us about Tara and the woman in Ladakh who was blind and she restored her sight. If the old lady experienced blindness, wouldn't that have been as a result of her karma or her good karma ending as she ended came to the end of her life. So does that mean Tara has the power to kind of change our own karma and the consequences of actions from our last life?
Yes, yep, I got your question.
My understanding is that we have to suffer and experience the consequences.
That once
of our
you've started
actions, right?
experiencing it, there's nothing you can really do until that experience is ended, right? Like, you can't change that karma once it's accumulated.
Yeah.
Am I getting the gist of it?
You're getting it right. I guess
Okay,
because
okay,
I've always
yes.
been taught, like, no one else can intervene in our karma, good or bad. We have to see through the consequences, right?
Sure. Yes, no, I can ask this now. I'm happy to ask this for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Tambo di nganso tuje ches nganso semshin chatsangwa chipa yempa mi na rwa drunjo yena nganso chatsangwa dunge nyong tubia migo padang dewa nyong tubia migo ba tia wachi gre duas rwa and chiwa di rwa ladak gi longen di kola re dua ko amadi ko longen dabo chatsa re duas dene ko droma yer chi yangsi kyorne rwa dene nima chi hop de kala ko mik den so tong tub swa rwa milam di ni sene rwa dene di sena jetsun droma nganso ledre gyorwa tang tu gire bes karin sena korong hakoye di longen chaya di lela tene chungi ores dene di lady ngaronso duru jagore mato tene zo drogiore mato chirula gihla lady gyorwa tang tu gyomares jetsun droma lady gyorwa tang tu gire bes chua dire dua
말아 다 거의 이제 드라마를 이치요 거로 가봐요 대바요한들 키팅 로마니지 옛날에 뭐한테 싸워요 왔어 대사 비가를 디필레 디니파메 가서 고쇼로요 왔어
ale dog drogres drogres so the point is that there are antidotes to unwholesome karma, right? So antidotes to the unwholesome karma that led to her blindness. And so we can understand that because of her strong faith and mindfulness of Tara, that when she sang the 21 praises, when she recited the mantras, these acted as purification of the karma. And the manifestation of that purification was the restoration of her sight.
그래서 다 대선은 이제 드라마 다 거로 시도 단대와치 쳐봐라 왔어 먼저 저야지요 다 저를 로바 전에 제가 그게 내서지요 이사 대운데 와요 알았어
아마디기 ngone jetsun droma ngone niga. So we can look at this, we shouldn't just look at it as one or the other. We can look at this as a synchronicity between the powerful faith and wish for purification from the side of the Ladakhi lady who recited this, and also from the power of the object as a final object of refuge of Venerable Tara to be able to bestow blessings. These two came together to lead to this result. So the substantial cause is from the side of the woman who recited the praises, right? And that faith led to that purification and that mindfulness. And then we can think of the auxiliary causes as coming about through this manifestation of Venerable Tara's enlightened activity to help her. So the other thing, though, that Geshe wants to mention as a caveat here is that it may have been a relatively lighter load of negative karma that was causing the problem with her eyes. So there will be instances where people have tremendous faith in Tara and pray to her, and there is a purification of karma, but it would not be sufficient to restore their sight, right? Like each case is going to be different. Yeah. But he'd like to touch on the understanding of karma too a little bit, because this is very important. So karma it's really action. That's the sense of this word karma. It means action. So if the action or the potentiality of that action is causing the phenomenon, if we have another action which is more powerful, it can overwhelm the power of the previous action to cause the problem. So it's like pouring fresh water into a bowl of salt water. We can greatly dilute the salt water. But Geshe says he understands the qualm. It's not an easy question, in fact. Yeah.
Thank you. That clarified it for me, and you explained it really well. So thanks to both of you.
Yeah. So Geshe said, one of the reasons it's not easy is because there's so many different types of people and different types of karma, and things are going to manifest differently.
Yeah.
So
I understand.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Thanks so much, Donna. So I think we'll go to Annie, and then we'll go to Dave for. I think there's some written questions as well. Go ahead, Annie.
Hi. My question is from the very, very beginning of class. Is there a difference between the fundamental mind and the main mind?
Nanso sem tsodi rua dang kandisla semgi ngodi kepar yorebesa. So semgi ngo nanso semgi ngo kandisla gore selshing rigpagi semdi rua di dang rua so sem kepar yorebes. Yeah. So to clarify, when we talk about main minds, that's the main mind that is active in that moment. So there are different types of main mind. So Annie, the Tibetan word is tsosem, semso, tsosem. So actually our eye consciousness can be the main mind in particular instances, as can our ear consciousness or our tongue consciousness even. Yeah. But the mental consciousness is kind of the main operating one, although it might not be the main one in a particular point in time, right? But that mental consciousness is the one that kind of abides at the heart in the traditional explanation. So that's a mental consciousness. So this mental consciousness is said to abide at about the heart level in the indestructible drop, which is formed from the reproductive substances of our mother and father. Yeah, so it's like at the heart level, but not near the surface of our body, closer to the middle of our body. So that is the main mind in the sense of the mind from which all of the other instances of consciousness are arising. Yeah. So that mental consciousness, it can operate through giving rise to what are called the 5 all-pervasive mental factors. So this, just if folks want the reference to look at this later, this is in the Lorik teachings. So the 5 omnipresent mental factors. Sorwa, yeah, dushi, yeah. 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 So those are the 5, and konso yang tso semribes. And they are mental factors. So those are 5 omnipresent mental factors that arise from the main mind. Yeah. Namshe di gyopo dang sing sin dabo. So the mental consciousness is like, we would say, the king. Geshe said the king, the prime minister, or the president, depending on where you live. And then these omnipresent mental factors are like the ministers, which allow him or her to carry out their duties. And one of those 5 omnipresent ones, and the one he's going to share with you because it's immediately relatable, is feeling, right? The feeling of pleasant unpleasant, or neutral feelings.
때문에 초기죠. 때 때는 저기 와봐. 대요 있잖아요.
So feeling is omnipresent, which means always in operation. Without that, very difficult for consciousness to operate.
듯이 듯이 세는 데서
Yeah. Another one of these five is discrimination, right? The mind of discrimination. For example, this is wholesome. This is unwholesome. That's another one.
semba.
Yeah.
semba.
Sempa. Sempa.
semba.
Yeah. Another one is mind. Mind itself. Sempa. Yeah.
semba diga 세 열판 로아도 내가 지금 말했어.
And sempa or mind in this particular case, right? This is not, by the way, these are not definitive definitions, so please don't hold them like that. This is very specific to Lorig. So mind is what allows the consciousness to go out and apprehend an object. It allows it to go out and apprehend an object.
나도 세 샬런도 나런도 가사칼런도 대하데 semba를 내가서 그래.
Yeah, so thinking about something to the west of us, to the north of us, to the east of us, and all of this is happening through that mental factor of mind.
내 강가용 semba는 로기 알았어.
And this is also the place where kunzoki
내 냠바레 레스 좀보레사
kudu
지도 매 게일레 게일레 강가로로 semba.
Nyarsa.
나사 마르코로 semba레.
Right. So negative karma, positive karma, neutral karma, all held within that context of mind as well, within these five omnipresent mental factors.
semba세 할리비 대체 모레스.
Yeah. So this one, in terms of the five, is the broadest, is the one that encompasses all the things.
jesu 파시 주요라 왔어.
Yeah.
드는 점바 서저 제바 젠지
Yeah.
요조도 semba는 보기야. semba레.
Sherab mare.
대죠 말에.
Na.
야. 시시 가르가.
See. So the first four of the six perfections, generosity, ethics, patience, and effort, these are also interestingly categorized as mind within these five omnipresent mental factors.
Deswa, so the she semba deswa.
Yeah.
That repas jiare.
Then the next one is repasana chik repa.
tupa.
The next one is contact, repa, or contact.
repa akasara shiba yedu tepa jiwa. Was this repa gelekares.
And that's the point of contact between the mind and the object that it is perceiving.
repa ila sheba.
And then yila chepa, which is mental engagement. This is the fifth one. Yila chepa, mental engagement.
다 대가 대로pa 요 이자 다 십노 시티거든요. 내가 침보체도 그래서.
Because these five are arising in conjunction, then what we are calling the main mind, which in this instance, these are not universal definitions. I have to say that again and again because it can get very confusing, which in this instance is referring to the mental consciousness.
내가 여보체나 또 침보체도. 누자체나 또 침보고
And that means also that you know, as human beings with these five omnipresent mental factors, we can engage in non-virtue very fully, we can engage in what is wholesome very fully. Listen.
And so when you're practicing Lojong, then are you engaging in these mental factors that are going off?
Lojong nyamlin chepe.
And when you practice Tonglen?
Lojong dang tonglen nyamlin chepe kabla dene nganso nga dinso peshe tangi yerebesa.
얘도 세 내가 제거되는 때한테 내가 제거하랬어.
Necessarily, yes, because any activity that the mind is engaging in is accompanied by these five omnipresent mental factors. That's why they're omnipresent means always there, basically, right? So that's why, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so Geshe said thank you for the question. Interesting question. Yeah. And important to understand all these. So yeah. So he said he all wants us to improve our understanding of mind and mental factors and Lorig as we go along, right? So we'll have to cover those at some point, I imagine. Dave, go ahead. Sorry, you've been waiting patiently there too. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a question from Cindy.
Yeah.
And Cindy's still here, so she may want to elaborate. The question for Geshe, this is a philosophical question I've struggled with for years. Do we fashion the material into the spiritual or the spiritual into the material? How should we practice it?
So Cindy, yes, thank you very much for your question. And there's not exactly a word in Tibetan that fits with spiritual. So I want to get you the best answer possible from Geshe, so I'd like you to rephrase the question if you could.
Oh, Cindy has a microphone. But let's see. Are you able to unmute, Cindy? Or maybe it can be in an email conversation.
I know I say
thank
the
you.
word. Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Cindy. Yeah,
Oh.
I hear you.
So much. I think Geshe had answered my question during the practice. Thank you so much.
Oh, you did get an answer? Okay, Cindy, but if you think about it or whatever and you want more information next week, feel free to come back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.
그래.
Any other questions, Dave?
Well, yeah, I've got two questions. So first question is regarding entering the path of seeing.
Yep.
Where you have the direct realization of the absence of inherent existence of phenomena, and this makes your mind now becomes the Dharma jewel, right?
Yep.
Does that mean you realize all Dharma?
Okay. Yes. All Dharma is in all phenomena, right?
Or no, like you realize the entirety of the Buddha's teachings in that moment?
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yep. Okay. Nganso tanda tonglam la drogi res, right? Tonglang topdu dene nganso di tompani ngosu topa chikyeres, right? Dene dela tene nganso chogi neso chat sangwa lamdang drebu chat sangwa hako drogi rebes?
고루 고루야.
Tompani ngosu
로
topa?
고루기도 하고 말아왔어. 델라테네 소설.
Ine di labna dene nganso di jampa dang denso yang to go gire duas tinyo sawa chaire di labna.
매미 토차레스. 델라테네 강하고 용 그레스. 고루기 고구 말레스. 세 고루기
Komas.
아 괜찮아.
Sabuju.
분ing에서도 로 고루기
Mhm.
내서 강가 두고 말아왔어.
Mhm.
이나 델라테네 고사티 강가하고 그레스.
Kangsagdi sena kangsagdi enagi tompani. Kare segyo. Kisa 보면.
아제 빼나니 세 티가 동반이 또 계세지 토서 왔어.
Mhm.
이 토차서나.
Yep.
딘니발라테네
Yep.
세 코로 들어가로게 돈이 쏘는 또 계세 티가 연다 따고 말다 또 말했어. 따고 말했어.
Losa.
구자 코로게 딘니발라테네 강가하고 용 그래.
So the wisdom realizing emptiness happens based with a mind. There is a mind that has a direct realization of emptiness. So that mind itself is realizing emptiness only, right? It's not realizing everything else.
강가 내천 리고도 로도 내천 강가하고.
But on the basis of that understanding, then other minds can understand the paths and their results and so forth. Dinyanga tsabure ko che netso karina hako drogires tongni tope sherabla teneng anso di jangshugi sem dang jampa dang ningje denso togyo mares.
토차레 테테
Di jangshu sempa rwa. Di mare. Di jangshu sempa rwa. Di dra chompa drona denso togyo mares. Kepa chompa chi so nyotra so.
미키 저시 삼만 로켓 세계요 말베스.
No, I don't think so. So I wanted a point of clarity for you, Dave, because it's actually very important. Are you talking about a bodhisattva who realizes emptiness? I don't remember you specifying that. I don't think you did.
I didn't. Well, I was assuming that was the case. What brought the question was when Geshe said that when you enter the path of seeing, you become the Dharma jewel and the Sangha jewel. And to me, that meant, okay, if you're the Sangha jewel, I can understand when you have this realization of entering the path of seeing, you become reliable in that you're no longer overwhelmed by delusion, and so that you're not going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that includes you're not going to deceive or fail to you're not going to be overwhelmed with delusion and harm others. Also.
Yes.
So I can understand that, but as a Sangha jewel and a Dharma jewel, wouldn't you then also be a complete representative of the Dharma for sentient beings as a Sangha jewel? And that's really my question: is that does this having this realization of the entering the path of seeing, does that give you all the tools you need to benefit sentient beings as a Sangha jewel?
I can't hear you now because your phone is going.
Sorry, you got to turn that off. Oh, sorry. Okay.
No worries. I think I got the gist of your question.
Yeah.
But so I just if I can, Dave, before so. Before I even say the question, Geshe wants to comment, but I have your question written down, Dave, so we will get to it. No worries.
Okay. Yeah.
다 빼나 타바지 보니 예티가 타발로 로케지나.
Yep.
동반이 ng에서도 또 자소나.
Yep. Hakusan.
동반이 ng에서도 돈은 여자 깔도 긴다보다 지금 하고 말was.
So if you are talking about, it depends on the being who's realizing emptiness. If it is a being on the Vajrayāna path who is aiming to become a hearer or a solitary realizer, at the moment that they have that realization on the emptiness of path of seeing, they enter meditative equipoise upon emptiness. And when they are in meditative equipoise upon emptiness, it is only emptiness that is being held in the mind. It is not everything.
여자 될지 돈이라.
Yep.
다 노자소나.
Yep.
타발은 너야 근로도 간디 이메 타비 내서.
Yep. Yep.
다 될을 파매와 가르서 그 강가스 오시트 디니 para다 하고 그랬어.
When they come out of that meditative equipoise on emptiness, the hearer or the solitary realizer, emptiness practitioner, is able to understand the entire path to liberation, what needs to be taken up, what needs to be abandoned, and so forth. So all that is there. So I should give some context to this question, Dave. I said to Geshe, because he was saying yes, initially said yes, it understands everything, and I'm like, but this one, the solitary realizer who realizes emptiness, he doesn't understand love, he doesn't understand compassion, or she doesn't understand those ones yet. Right? So that's why there was that banter back and forth. Yeah, so he said, Kedrup warned me with reason this time, because I was telling him, it's like, you're walking into a trap, because if you say they understand everything, that means they understand love and compassion, but the solitary realizer doesn't, right? So so that's what we were discussing. Then he said, if I don't get praise occasionally, I get cranky. I don't think I get praise that often, to be honest. Yeah. Yep. But the bodhisattva the bodhisattva practitioner with the wisdom realizing emptiness, when they're in single-pointed meditative equipoise upon emptiness, it's the same story. But then, when they come out of that meditative equipoise, they are able to understand Buddhahood, how it's possible, the paths to get there, what needs to be taken up, and what needs to be abandoned in the same way. Yeah. So now I'm going to ask your question, Dave, now that we're through all that, about how the Dharma and Sangha jewels and actualizing them relate to this. Nganso tongni ngosu tokpa kaplolaya roa nganso di gendun kunchuk dang chogi kunchuk tobgire duas ine nganso tama lemasons ine korangire ine nganso cho kunchuk hakona gendun kunchuk chana dene semshen goya kariyana karichene take to gilmaris karinsa nganso chatsangwa dapo hakotores chogi neso soso semla kepares roa karichene tama yomares segires.
Mimi ta pa mewazo ke kanga sana zo toya marawas.
Yep.
Nyamo teze. Nyamo karse karta. Kazo kata do leshi la to gde.
Yes, yep.
Kata gri mo ne ba shi toya de leshi gri ta la ya res.
Yes. So Geshe is saying that it relates, and so now we are going into some vocabulary here. But the reason, so this is your question, why, having realized the Dharma and Sangha jewels within themselves, does he or she not able to kind of be everything for sentient beings? Why is this not considered sort of completion? And so Geshe says it relates to the kind of afflictions. Yeah. It relates to the kinds of afflictions that are overcome. So there are two types of afflictive obscurations: the intellectually acquired and the innate. The intellectually acquired and the innate. Lenche di meba so tu mason.
Koi tsawa te meta na meba so toya ma ta.
Lenche di meba. So they have overcome the intellectually acquired through their realization of the Sangha and Dharma jewel, yet there is a subtle aspect of this innate afflictive obscuration, which is actually the very root of samsara, which has not been completely overcome. So that is why they are not yet at completion.
Right. So
the real root actually of samsara, Tanzan lenche, Nyumong lenche. The root of samsara, right, we would agree is self-grasping ignorance, I think, right? And so there are two types of self-grasping ignorance. The imputed self-grasping ignorance, which is intellectually acquired. So these are two things are true at once. It is a imputed self-grasping ignorance, and it is also intellectually acquired. And then there is an innate self-grasping. So both of those have to be overcome. Right. So imputed self-grasping is called intellectually acquired because these are the reasons that we tell ourselves why the self or why other things exist inherently. That's why it's called intellectually acquired. Why is that intellectually acquired self-grasping or the imputed self-grasping not the root of samsara? Yeah. Right. Oh, right. So it's specified as intellectually acquired because we have the sense of ourselves as human beings with an intellect who conceive of ourselves in this way, but the mountains or the trees and so forth, they don't have that, right? There is, and the animals don't have that, right? But the animals are still within samsara. We would agree with that, right? So what is holding them within samsara? This innate self-grasp. Ridak like ri? Yeah. Sorry. So the birds, the mammals, these other kinds of living beings, all of them have that innate self-grasping, but they don't possess the intellectually acquired one. Yeah. And innate means something that naturally arises. In other words, this particular kind of self-grasping is not intellectually constructed. So the practitioner here, they have brought forth a wisdom realizing emptiness and been able to address this imputed self-grasping, so that intellectually constructed self-grasping, but they have not yet been able to completely overcome the innate self-grasping. So they are not yet at completion. Yeah. This nganso shinjib tamol avna digirve shinjib tamol. Lenche shinjib lebe. Ale los. Oh geez. So I think Dave, were there any other questions or did we cover?
Yeah, it's more of a request for advice on because I feel like I have an obstacle because when Geshe was talking today, my mind was looking at if I want to realize bodhicitta, I'm going to have to realize definite emergence. Okay, so if I do that, I found my mind recoiled from the intensity of the awareness of suffering.
Right.
That is implied by definite emergence. And so, how do you get over that? How do you enter into the depth of the awareness of suffering that accompanies definite emergence in order to become a bodhisattva, in order to realize bodhicitta? That's because it's really tough. That's hard.
Yes. This was from Deki Lee's question, right, about entering the path or not. Yes, I remember when this happened, and you need renunciation to enter the path. Yep. Yeah. I remember. Okay. Nanso ngenjung seria dirwa ngenjung nanso tekshin gilam zuliala ngenjung gogire duas. Then disa nanso jangchu gisem tobila nanso ngenjung gogire duas. Ngenjung kiela nanso di kandisla gire dungelgi rangjin mambo samlo tango gire duas dunya gi rangjin kola samlo tang na dene sem tets kandes lagre lo debo lamsang dabo chi mepa cha gire duas ro and then ganso di dunya di shiptra chene tong mi tubya gi chorwa di kandes pangores
shonji se to bala niji chembo to ko diwas nije to bala senje yuzu ka kangne sono to ne la de phoge meba zo jiwa ba to ko diwas.
Yeah. So Geshe said that there's no way around it because bodhicitta depends upon compassion. Compassion depends upon an unbearable wish to separate beings from their suffering. Developing that wish to separate beings from their suffering necessarily depends upon a deep conception or understanding of their suffering. Yeah. And actually, like Tambodi. Yeah. Right. And so, even when we're doing the 6 causes of the 7-point cause and effect instruction, right? Definite emergence is an aspect of an accompanying mind. Ngenjindi samlo thanya nganso di dunya mambo samlo thango gire du adi that tes debo mepa yine jangshu gisem tobela ngenjungo gires ngenjung mepe jangshu gisem yomares di tes kala kabures
mete kala kabure amdo tabi deshi sono to de was tabi deshi tempo chinga drug de tenye lo tempo de was
yeah
ninjugo seri.
So Geshe said, instead of focusing on the negative aspect of definite emergence, think about it in a positive sense. What's another definition of definite emergence? A mind that definitely strives towards liberation. So if you're able to think, I definitely want liberation, I definitely want to strive to that, this is also a mind of definite emergence. Within samsara, right, there is only problems. There is not any stable happiness to be found. So I want to strive towards something better, to strive towards liberation. So Geshe said, we often emphasize this aspect of renunciation. This is actually one of the reasons why I do not like the word renunciation, because it's not just not doing something, it's also striving towards something, Geshe said. Embedded within this word ngenjung, which is literally definite emergence, there's an implicit liberation. So when we hear renunciation, liberation doesn't come into my mind immediately, right? Geshe is saying, when you hear ngenjung, when you hear definite emergence, you immediately should think of liberation. So the mind of renunciation, Dave, that you need to produce is simply the mind that definitely strives towards liberation. If you think about it like that, it might make it easier.
Right. There's a direction component to that.
Yeah, drolam da what you do. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So the mind of definite emergence, the mind that definitely strives towards liberation, are the same mind. But as an assisting factor to develop this mind, yes, we need an understanding of the faults of samsara. We do. Yeah.
What occurred to my mind was Vajrayāna refuge it helps with this sense of being overwhelmed by suffering. Vajrayāna refuge.
Tekshin kyamdro yona dene dunya mantra gitso di tes nyumru dro gitwa. Kanjha hakomasan di digreslan. Ngatso di tekshin gi kyamdro. Sorry, can you explain that?
So you go for refuge from a refuge is dependent on acknowledging there's a problem or there's suffering, there's something you want to change, and also that there's a direction where you can become free from what you want to be free from, right? So it's acknowledging there's a problem and that there's a solution, right?
Ale tekshin gi kyamdro drona dene nyogtra di dunga yeres ine drosa ropa chesa yang yeres da uchi samlo thangre devas. So Geshe said, yes, so if you practice like this, rather than kind of the mind becoming narrower, the mind becomes more expansive, right? Yeah. So that's a good place to go.
Yeah. And Vajrayāna refuge is not just concerned with your own pain, but all pain.
sayina.
하고선. Yeah.
다 이나 시라가 야보 다 제체네 tum바니 쇼로 초와 템볼레소나.
Yes.
누가 매와서 저기 야바 통거 딜라. 근데 갈라데 맨로.
So there's a universal problem in a way that's being addressed here, and it's universal in the sense that we are contemplating suffering, and that can be overwhelming because the feeling that there's a solution to this, we haven't developed conviction in that completely. But when we have a thorough understanding of emptiness, we will definitely see that there is an end to this suffering, and so then it will be like a lot less difficult to contemplate it. Yeah. We can, because we see that the mind, which allows the suffering to manifest, that in a way creates that suffering, is completely mistaken, right? It's a mistaken mind.
It's a tragic mistake of the mind.
Yeah. So this is the task of wisdom realizing emptiness.
You know, this, I get what Geshe is saying there, because in the all-encompassing yoga meditation, where the Vajra represents emptiness, and the conventional bodhicitta is the moon, I imagine that moon it contains all sentient beings. And the Vajra there is the solution to all the suffering that's there on that moon of all sentient beings. And that's a big relief to think that it's coming like that.
Setabya chikyore Dza Rinpoche labyati karisagore chatsangwagi ngejor nganso dawa dang dorje setagire duas. Dene dorje di toni tope shera samlo tanga dawa di nangla semshin chatsangwa yeres dene semshin chatsangwa dorje la tene yagre doye. Yes, and Geshe says we can think about it as a resultant aspect with a tantric psychology, right? Yeah.
Okay, so when my mind recoils from suffering, I just have to think there's a direction out of that. That's the focus. Yeah. Thank you.
And on that note, folks, we are at almost... I was saying we're almost at 12:40, maybe time to call it a day, but Geshe wants to say something just before we go. Yeah. Right. So Geshe said that we had a question last time about the transitory collection as I and mine. And so so this is an important question, he was saying. So there is a grasping of the transitory collection as I, and there is a grasping at the transitory collection as mine. And these are there's a distinction. There's a distinction. So Geshe said today we're going to do short. We can't have a long discussion, but it's a little bit of a taster. He wants to do a little bit of a taster. So each of these have a distinct object. They each have a distinct object.
This one?
Yeah.
That's what's got to
Yeah. So the self-grasping of a transitory collection, as I, its object of reference is the self or the I.
This one?
Its apprehended object or aspect is an I that is inherently existent. An I that is inherently existent. So this apprehended aspect of the I of being truly existent, this is necessarily mistaken. The object of reference, the mikyul, the self, that's relatively existent, right? It is not a non-existent. So Geshe would think for the self of Geshe Sonam, right? He would think the I that is Sonam, that's correct. That part is correct. But the apprehension of inherent existence that comes along with that self, this is incorrect.
this one.
Yeah.
Ta kale khashu de ngayon de binjita te pe nyora chimores.
So the view of the transitory collection as mine, this is a very difficult topic because there's not agreement on it. Firstly, so that's one of the reasons. And normally, and it's just difficult. But we should try to understand it.
Ngayon ngai lapa ngai ngojala so lila wore sares. Siwozo sares.
So if you think about the mine, M-I-N-E, if you think about the mine in relation to the head or relation to the hand or relation to the physical parts of the body, this is easier, right? So we can start with that. That's a good place to start. Because at that point, it's a grasping at a self of phenomena, not a grasping at a self of persons, right? So starting there can be easier in this case. Yep. So is this view of the transitory collection as mine a grasping at inherent existence of a self of persons or a self of phenomena? There's a scholarly disagreement on this. There is not a universal answer to this. Yeah. Sulagire. So if you say grasping at the transitory collection as mine, then So the mind that is thinking that there is a self that exists by way of its own character, rangingane drupagi dag seriedi ngeres. Chikyang ko given to Kyune. Yes. Okay, so the mind, the mind that is apprehending the mine as inherently existent, that is a view of the transitory collection. That is a view of the transitory collection.
This one?
Yep. But is the mine the same as self or I? Is the mind the same as self or I? This is where you run into problems.
This one?
Yeah. So some people will say the mind is still a conception of a self of persons. It is a conception of a self of persons. And there's not even agreement amongst the Gelugpas into this. So Sera, Drepung, and Ganden disagree. Sera, me parece. So instead of J, they would say that mine is not I or self. They would say that mine is not I or self. Yeah. So you have to look at the meaning generality of the word. So when the sound mine enters the ear consciousness, what sense comes up? A sense of I or self comes up as soon as you hear this word mine. So we can think actually that when that sound goes into the ear, two things are comprehended. The word mine, you comprehend that, but also I or self. You comprehend both these things.
This one. That ngai lapa jala sasona. Dance te chi dance shul roger mat kuza dance shul roger yamares.
But it depends upon how the word is heard. If instead of mine just by itself, you say that house is mine, or that hand is mine, then it goes to the self of phenomena, because mine is being conceptualized with something external. Depends on how they do.
That's just see what the chai yamar that three goes shit and kale shit.
Yes. So Geshe says he wants to leave the discussion here for now, but think about this for now, and then we will come to a continued discussion. Yeah, we'll come to a continued discussion. Yeah.
This one. Nieta.
Yeah.
Me tenta kare segi yaresena. Jita said that you may tell.
Yeah.
Kuza yigo magati tu yares.
Because there's a bigger question, which is whether this view of the transitory collection, gongda jikta yongwala kangsa guguyo dangme.
Me tell.
Yeah.
Kuza yigo maga.
Whether the view of the transitory collection requires a conception of a self of persons or not. Kangsa gidag guguyo pa dangmepa.
Kuza da se kama kuza.
Ale.
Kuza yigo maga. Kuza yoga maga kecha mawores.
Right. So is a person required in order for a view of a transitory collection to be manifest or not? This is another question.
Yeah, so
Geshe said that he's giving this as an intro. So this is food for thought, and then we will revisit it next week, because he said we're quite a... Yeah.
Jita do kuza danzi jila musamaji yares, musamaji kaze yos. Tatanya. Jita do kuza danzi ni sujache gare, samuare, te keja hako gares. Jita
dang?
Kuza danzi.
Yeah. And then there's a question, is the view of the transitory collection a more encompassing grouping, or is Kangsa
Kuza danzi?
Or is the grasping at a self of persons the more encompassing designation?
Kuza danzi kanga jita mare, jita kanga kuza danzi res.
Okay, so not all ignorance grasping. Sorry, now I'm totally confused. I'm actually completely confused now. Younger Sungdang.
Jita kanga kuza danzi res.
All views of the transitory collections are necessarily false apprehensions of a self of persons. All views of the transitory collections are necessarily false apprehensions of a self of persons.
Kuza danzi kanga jita mare es.
Not all false apprehensions of a self of persons are views of a transitory collection.
This one, pena ngai inare, kedra inare, choros inare, yenda ruji jita pa kaze sonotona, kuza danzi ma jita rasa yo mares. Pena ngega, soso mai bache, soso yenda mai inare, tando inare, chala inare, ruji jita pa sonoto sona.
Yeah.
Kuza danzi res.
Yeah. So
jita mares.
So anytime we conceive of perhaps ourselves or another person or something like Geshe Sonam or Kadrup or myself as Rangshingi Drupa Samlotana, as an inherently existent self of persons, right? That is a grasping at a self of persons. However, it is not necessarily a view of the transitory collection.
Yeah.
So that's universal. So thinking about the self of persons of Kadrup or Geshe Sonam or yourself. But the view of the transitory collection, Sosomato Yongyomares, can only be connected with your grasping at a self of persons of yourself individually, not to someone else. You can only have the view of the transitory collection related to yourself. Once you understand this distinction, then that is the moment to have a conversation about what the distinction is between the view of the transitory collection as I and mine, right? That's the time to have that
어 땡아주
conversation.
못하는 시에게 아주잔 시에게 자도 뚜빠니가 손으로 또 다이 라비가 대진다가 쳐보여 때모여.
Yeah. And as you unfold this conversation further, you'll start to understand more about how a sound gives rise to a conceptual thought or mind about these things.
어 자도 뚜빠니 열로도 찌바찌조레스. 자이 가르라 소나요. 다 깔래가서 그만 깨자시기도아.
Yeah.
말. 자. 뭐 깨자 가르시에 봐이나. 뚜빠티오 된 노지도요레스. 셈 뚜빠.
Right. So based upon the sound that one is hearing, if you're paying attention, right, conceptual minds are arising based upon the sound that is entering your ear.
어 뚜빠티오 가르 따게 요나요. 마티오 된 노지 라비요레스 라비카라. Tena dadu tupani roto chipares.
Sorry. Petes lagore nga chikyang hogimendes. Nga so dradi pagila kampa chung mumpo chikyeres. Amchokladro. Na dene nga so sem nanglola kampa mumpo chung chikyong. Right.
Dadu tupani roto chipares.
Right. So I said to Geshe, I wanted to break this down into an example because I think this is getting like kind of very nebulous. So the example I gave was, does that mean if somebody says to me, the small blue house on the hill, that my conceptual mind is forming that thought or that mental image of the small blue house on the hill? And Geshe said yes.
Mimete jako garmadu ngazu gapado mai gado mego asa teji netse mombo yungo rawas. Teji ndewa chimbores
So
kaleka.
sikten so chen Vajrayāna ta make up chikla.
Yeah, that's
the mom trasun ta. Na Jason, sorry.
어 teji sono to 저게 도와서 너지.
Yeah.
노지도 저게 말했다네. 어 다 ngazu 인지메트 로리노 판자로 teji 그거 뉴스 kaleka.
Yeah. So understanding these, and so these are the kind of slagret nganso dradang den chikere, right? So these discussions, which also bring us to a discussion of the meaning generality and the sound generality, all of these can be found in the lorik, in the mind and the mental factors teaching. So that's where to look for more information on that.
다 이마 아주 전에 시기다 전동에서 라이브다 걸어도는 맞잖아. 세타지.
Ale chuse chiktor padroswati tiki mare petile manga.
메토 좀 대화요 아마르 가서 대지로 가러와서 같이.
Demo. Yeah. So we'll come to a discussion of all of these things later. Yeah. Okay. So let us end it here as we are an hour over time. But thank you, folks, and we are coming back to a discussion of this next week. Geshe let me know, warned me, let me know. I don't know. So I will prepare more vocabulary for this next week and we can have another discussion. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Yeah, lovely.
And thank you to say hi to Manoshi.
Yeah, she's at the hospital with her mom.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
But please send hugs.
Will do. Yeah, will do. Thank you.
How amazing, no?
What? What's amazing?
That he's come back from B's question last week with this
Yes,
whole...
I know.
It's like,
and
how
B was
stunning.
Here. Yes, really. Yeah.
B was there.
Yes, she was still here when he started.
Yeah. She was listening. She was listening very carefully.
Yes.
I'm just saying, this is so wonderful. Now I have to unthread, because I think, I was getting it and then I didn't get it. Did you get it?
No, my mind wandered off into it being a
hospitals.
No. The sense of mind. Animals also have a sense of mind, so this has to be an innate delusion. So I was kind of thinking about that. I
was being wicked, and I was saying, "What about my children? Because they are persons."
Yes,
you know, it's kind of fun. But isn't it really nice that all the monasteries disagree?
Yes,
that enables you to think about it rather than thinking there's a right answer.
Yeah.
Because I think mine is such an interesting concept now.
It is.
And,
I hadn't really
and
thought
Buddhists,
about this before.
You know, my dharma, my lineage, my teacher. I mean, the whole thing is just
so much trouble.
Well, it's like people take it off the I, and then I think people often take it off themselves and put their ego mind thing onto all these other dharma things, and it's just as fierce as the grasping of the I.
Yeah. So somebody told me once that the ordinary people are attached to things. Slightly more evolved people are attached to ideas.
Well, that was an intellectual who said that. I mean, come on, you can have attachments at all levels. I mean,
No,
yeah.
it's just what you're attached to.
I mean, what you're going through now with Manoshi is a huge issue around attachment, no?
Well, yeah, it brings to yeah. I mean, Geshe Kid came early last week, and said some prayers and said, Ai's. So Ai is mother in Maharashtrian and in Marathi.
Yeah.
So Ai's mind is pretty good. She's not really attached. She's let go pretty much.
Oh, that's lovely.
So that's really good. And yeah, I think
things will be more peaceful.
Yeah. But then he said it would also be really, really good if she were to think of, okay, letting go of this life, but then what? Where are you going? And so for her to think, wherever I go, may I go where I can benefit a lot of people. So if you can think that way, then it'd be really, really beneficial. And so I passed that along to her, and I could see that she was really listening and nodded. So that's lovely.
But I think the complicated thing is you and Manoshi now, because it's a lot to process.
Yeah, we came home that, so the day that the hospice care worker came by, which was only Friday. We came to a house, and Manoshi said, so that means Mom is not coming back to this house? And then we started crying.
Mom's going on holiday.
Yeah, Mom is not coming back. It's like there's
a big change for you both, no? Because you were living with that. That's a huge change.
In our marriage, we've rarely lived alone. When we first got married, we had I owned a house and we had roommates. So we and they became good friends, but we weren't alone. It's been quite rare that we've been alone. So that's going to be something new.
But isn't it nice this is in between? Because you have a chance to rest while your mother-in-law is in transition, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, the death and the separation are separated.
Yeah.
Which gives you more chance to...
Am I still streaming on Facebook? I thought